Okay, so I think we're still waiting for a few more participants, but I'm just going to go ahead and start the welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us at this fast forward panel, um, Latinx representation in opera with two very, very wonderful guest speakers. Excuse me, I'm gonna admit one more person. I think they're joining us. Okay, welcome to our latest person joining us. So today's fast forward panel, like previously stated, is about Latinx representation in opera. And I have two very, very phenomenal special guests that I'm so excited to have with us this evening in collaboration and hopefully have more collaborations in the future. So before I let them introduce themselves and grace us with their wonderful presence, um, I'm going to ask if, at any point you guys have questions to shoot them in the chat just so we have an even flow amongst the presentation, and our presenters will either address it at the moment or wait till the end, and they will also ask for some participation at some point. So I am going to hand it over to them.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm going to go ahead and share the screen so we can get started. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today. Thank you for sharing the space for what I know is a very busy time. I am Cynthia and I am joined by my friend and colleague, Dr. Zuly Inirio. Today, we will be talking about Latinx representation in opera and providing a little more clarity on what that looks like through an inclusive lens. As I said in my article, if you were able to read that, it was through BSR, it's still up. The title in itself is a little deceiving because the Latinx population is one of the most misunderstood demographics. And as you will learn through this PowerPoint, this misconception really creates this sense of homogenization that ultimately erases the most historically excluded voices within our comunidad. So let's go ahead and get started on the next slide and do a little bit of introductions. My name is Cynthia López Pérez. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I identify as a Chicana, as a first-generation Mexican-American, and to honor my native roots and Mixteca familia. I want to acknowledge and honor the territory of Massachusetts, Pawtucket, and their neighbors, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples from which I'm calling in from. I'm part of the team at Latina Women in Opera, along with Dr. Inirio. It's a platform we have on Instagram that celebrates and promotes femme-identifying Latinas and non-binary and gender non-conforming Latinx. I'm also an opera singer, an administrator specializing in diversity, equity, inclusion, and an educator. And now I'm going to hand it over to my girl, Dr. Inirio.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Zuly Inirio. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I identify as Afro-Latina, Black Latina, Latina by way of Dominican Republic. I'm an arts advocate or an arts activist, whichever you prefer, a performer. I'm a soprano and also a cultural worker. As Cindy said, I am part of Latina Women in Opera, and I love the work that we do there in celebrating our community, our Latina and femme identifying community. I'm also part of the Leadership Council of Black Opera Alliance. And this year, I started the Afro-Latinx Song and Opera Project, which aims to commission musical works that tell the stories of Afro-Latinx community by them, for them, um, which is something that we don't get a lot, right? We get a lot of people writing about us, but we never get to tell our own stories. So that's really the focus. I want authenticity and a genuine telling of our stories for the classical music canon. It'll diversify the classical music canon and then give performance opportunities to that same community. Did I miss anything? No. Okay. Oh, yes, I did. I want to acknowledge that I am calling in from what is now Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but I am on stolen land, and this land is of the Shawnee and Monongahela people. So I want to introduce some of the topics that we'll briefly discuss today. We're going to talk about accessibility for Latinx opera singers. We're also going to talk about history, very briefly talk about things like the casta system, Mestizahe, and mejorar la raza / blanqueamiento. And we're talking about these topics in a very short amount of time. So please keep in mind that these are racial histories in Latin America that are very complex and very nuanced. And this presentation is just to serve as a primer to make some connections between our history and how it shows up today, and how it shows up in a space where we're being cast and we're being put in different positions, especially in performance, based on the way we look, right? Yes, of course, the way we sing as well, but there's an element of the way we look that goes into it. So, yeah, we're going to examine those topics very lightly today and maybe take some questions afterwards about what we talked about and hopefully delve a little deeper.
Perfecto. Gracias, Zuly. So now I'm going to be talking about our first topic, accessibility. As you can see, I have 4 examples here, but these are really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to accessibility in opera. These are just examples of what we as young artists are dealing with in this industry. So with my first example here, pay to sings, if you're not familiar with them, they can cost anywhere from $1,000 to $6,000 for about 2 weeks to a month of training. That's not including time off, traveling expenses, application fees, enrollment fees, the possibility of returning young artist members. So you auditioning for a role that may not be even open. So you're just giving out your money for no reason. Obviously, I'm just mentioning pay to sings, but when also including young artist programs that pay you, it can still be very, very costly, from traveling to and from auditions, lodging at a hotel, paying from a warm-up space, paying for a pianist, the myriad of rehearsals to get your music in tip-top shape. I mean, the list goes on, and it can amount to hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month. This next example here is from data from a communal Excel sheet filled out by hundreds of singers in each young artist program in the country and beyond. It's average weekly pay for a reputable YAP is $475.96, with a median pay of $450, and that is as of March 2020. So that amounts to about $1,800 a month. As of July 5th, 2021, the average rent for Washington Heights is about $1,875, and that is on the low end. This is just simply not enough money without assistance. And of course, those with the most financial privilege will prevail past this obstacle. Next example here, the lack of diverse compositions in the classical music canon. So for example, and I'm going to introduce some stats again from a communal forum. It's called Yak Tracker. It's a forum created by tenor Jordan Pitts. It's just a nice, safe place for young artists to be able to kind of convene and communicate. But these are stats from one of the most recognized competitions in the country, the Metropolitan Opera National Council auditions, or now referred to as LaFont. So in 2021, of the cumulative repertoire presented at the MONC, less than 6% of operas represented were by BIPOC composers, and less than 1% by WOC composers, so Black, Indigenous, women of color. There are also several reports of folks taking these non-traditional repertoire, or in other words, music not by a dead old white man, and rather than receiving solid feedback, instead being shamed for bringing something different in. So this last example, lack of diverse representation in race, body types, LGBTQ plus, disabled folks, and more within the entire industry. So this doesn't really need a stat attached. Just like look at the many rosters with either no racial or ethnic diversity, or with that one or two racial or ethnically diverse singers. These lack of perspectives can really create unwelcome environments. And I am talking about the entire institution of opera, from admin to makeup artists. Furthermore, in regards to representing Latinx people specifically, especially during Latinx Heritage Month, if Black, Asian, Indigenous, LGBTQ plus IA, and many other intersectionalities are not being presented as part of our community, it only further reinforces homogenizing and erasing these historically excluded voices. Next slide, please. So there are so many barriers. And like I said, this is really just the tip of the iceberg to create a career within the opera industry, which are you know, I mentioned four, but I just didn't mention all of them. I just don't have the time to in this short presentation. And while I understand that these barriers affect everyone, those who will be the most systemically affected and feel the most effects of intergenerational systemic trauma are BIPOC, and even further Black folks. That is why accessibility must no longer be seen as an asset for an institution, but a necessity. I personally do believe that quantitative and qualitative research are both necessary when revolving the work of diversity and inclusion. I genuinely don't believe that one can exist without the other. For example, Black Opera Alliance, which Zuly is part of the leadership council there, has been doing exceptional work with TRG management to prioritize data analysis and how it relates to the inclusion or exclusion of Black folks in the industry, which is fabulous because we just don't have enough of that quantitative research. This to say, the work is just not complete without humanity. If humans were only subject to being analyzed by numbers, well, we just wouldn't be humans, right? So that being said, I will now hand it over to Dr. Inirio to talk a little bit about Latin American history.
Thank you so much, Cindy. And I just wanted to touch on something that Cindy said. We also have a colleague that is also advocating for data analysis in the arts to just see a better picture of the inequities present, and that's Mansi Shah of Colors of Classical Music. She's also a data analyst, and she's doing wonderful work as well. So today I'm going to talk about, very briefly, as I said, the casta system, mestizaje, and mejorar la raza or blanqueamiento. I'm just going to go to the image that we always see when we talk about the casta system and talk about those three things. I keep doing the arrow and it's the mouse. Okay. So this is the image that we always see, right, when we talk about the casta system. And then as it's blown up now, we see the different names for different mixed racial mixtures. The casta system was created in colonial times in Latin America to explain mixed race families back in Spain. But the racial hierarchy still remains, and I would argue that the racial hierarchy still remains today. It was created to maintain power over and superiority over racial groups. These particular paintings that depicted the casta system were a series of paintings that were commissioned in the late 1700s, and they were painted for the general public in Spain because they wanted to show racial diversity and mixing that was happening in the New World. And they were commissioned to explain how the society is multiracial in Latin America to the elites in Spain. There were laws that were created in the casta system that restricted certain races from being in certain occupations. But oddly enough, and this again, I'm always going to say this, white supremacy is not innovative, right? It's always going to do and replicate the thing that it always does. Within the casta system, while they had certain laws that excluded certain races from having certain occupations, it was still flexible because you could move within the hierarchy if you had enough money. You could buy whiteness, you could buy access. Does this sound familiar? Right. Some of the names used to describe the different mixed race categories in the casta system are still found today. I don't know if anybody wants to look at the image and see if you see anything that is familiar. Is there something like a nickname that still remains from the casta system that you're familiar with? That if you want, you can drop it in the chat. I'm looking. Oh, mestizo. Yep. See, I'm looking at number 5 here. Cholo is a word from the casta system, sure is. I'm looking at number 5 here, mulatto. Yeah. How many people have heard that word? So I'm Dominican, so I hear that word. Dominican Republic, yo no soy negra, yo soy mulata, right? Because God forbid I'm negra. But that's another story for another day. Thank you guys for dropping those things in the chat. The next thing I'm going to talk about is mestizaje. I'm going to leave this image up because I think it's important. So mestizaje is referring to the racial and cultural mixing of indigenous folks with Europeans. This mestizaje emerged in Latin America and then started shifting into like a multicultural perspective and having multicultural policies. It's Mestizaje has been considered problematic by US scholars because it sustains racial hierarchies and it celebrates the blanqueamiento that happens with mestizaje. And mestizaje has also been used to justify the lack of examination of anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity in our communities, and has been used to be like, oh, well, we're just one race. We don't have issues having to do with race. That is unequivocally false because I always, when I'm having this discussion with people, I always say, okay, if you think that we don't have any issues with race, why is it that we can still go to any Latin American country and people that look a certain way have the most power and privilege and have the power and the privilege, and certain people that look a certain way are still considered lower in lower socioeconomic brackets? That is not, that's by design, right? Those are remnants of colonialism that we still haven't shed. And we're not examining them because we're all mestizos, right? We're all mixed. So we don't have to examine it because we're one race. So that brings me to blanqueamiento. So this is a social, political, and economic practice that was used in many post-colonial countries in the Americas to improve the race, right? Mejorar la raza. When we talk about mestizaje, when we talk about blanqueamiento, we talk about it in a very casual way, but we forget how this is a history of very violent genocide of specific people that don't fit a specific model that is propped up by white supremacy. The term blanqueamiento is synonymous with racial whitening, and it's also racial whitening. And this racial whitening can be considered in the biological sense and in the symbolic sense. So, symbolically, you can say that blanqueamiento represents an ideology that emerged from the legacies of Europe, right? Colonialism, that anything close to whiteness and to those European roots is better. And biologically, it literally meant that we're trying to breed out the otherness that is not that's not whiteness, right? We're literally trying to marry lighter skinned folks to whiten the race. So this is a lot. This is a very short time to talk about this, but yeah, we can. I hope that this inspires you to delve deeper into these things, and we can start making those connections of how it shows up today. There I go. Oh, did I go back? I went back. On to you, Cynthia.
Thank you. Thank you. So now I'm going to talk about Latinidad and the mess, I guess, how the mess of Latinidad. And let's just start by defining it as best as we can. It's an all-inclusive term for a variety of diverse peoples and attributes spanning 33 countries, hundreds and hundreds of languages, and a variety of intersectionalities, including race, ability, gender, et cetera, et cetera. So just from the definition, I think you can see that it's getting into problematic territory. When talking about Latinidad, it's important to ask who this term includes and who it does not. As referenced in Dr. Inirio's presentation of Latin American history, these settler colonial systems are not actually that complicated. Many of them are still, they are still working in the same way that they were intended. And those within closer proximity to whiteness yield privileges that are not afforded to all because of the pervasiveness of colorism. So here we have the hashtag Latinidad is canceled, coined by López, an Afro-Indigenous activist. He pairs with this meme, which, as you can see, I'm gonna have to look on my separate screen here because it's very small there and I can't see it. But well, as you can see, it's a picture of a car and a highway. Straight ahead, we have, and I quote, admitting racism and anti-Blackness exists and a commitment to build solidarity with Black and Indigenous people. And on the right, we have Mestizahe supremacy and your insistence that your great, 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 great grandmother was Black. So as you can see, the car is taking a sharp right turn right into that exit, and the car is labeled Latinidad. This meme went viral, and it really brought a reckoning among Latinx folks of thinking more of their identity, not just by nationality, but also by race. Of course, there is a huge pushback with this movement to cancel Latinidad. But I really encourage folks to reflect on what canceling Latinidad is calling for. It's calling for inclusion of historically excluded voices. It's calling for Black liberation, Indigenous sovereignty. It's calling for community in the absence of belonging. And that is why it has never been more crucial for non-Black Latinx to understand their identity as a tool to further inform their actions in these white supremacist structures. And I'm actually gonna read a quote from this book that I'm currently reading by Tarana Burke, and it's actually an anthology, and it's called "You Are Your Best Thing." And it says, one second, because I actually lost the page. It says, "I don't believe your anti-racist work is complete or valid or useful if you haven't engaged with Black humanity." And she is actually, I forgot to mention this, but she is actually the founder of the Me Too movement. With that said, we can go ahead and move forward. Zuly, I think you're still muted.
I'm muted. Okay, I'm not muted now. So as we fast forward to today, we can discuss how do we move towards a vision of Latinx representation in opera that is more equitable for our community. And the first thing I want to touch on is visibility. Is visibility enough? No, I think that it's not, but it's a start, right? It's also important to remember that visibility could also quickly turn into tokenism and performative actions that don't do a lot. What's important about moving forward is intentionality. Intentionality is important. It's important that arts administrators and opera companies do the work of understanding the people that they hire and what choices they make in programming and in curatorial work that they do for their companies and for those spaces with intention. We also think that transparency is important. Opera companies should pull back the curtain, listen to feedback about their practices, and honestly, we would all be all better for it, right? There's always a fear of something new, of changing, especially in this art form. But if we can just work together to make it happen, I think we would fast forward a much faster. Co-creation is super important in this space as well. I mean, what better way to make sure that those that you want to uplift um, are uplifted by making them part of the process of creating the spaces and curating what you want to put forth. Strategic planning. This goes hand in hand with intentionality. I think that it's a way of being intentional. And it shows that you care enough about the work that you're doing as an opera company, as an arts administrator, to make a plan to have the most impact. And finally, accountability. This is the most important of all, because when you're doing something new, when you're trying to make things better for a community, your actions, sometimes you might do the wrong thing, right? And accountability for your actions is paramount in that process. Taking responsibility for any wrongdoing goes a long way in learning and moving forward. I know that there's sometimes a lot of shame when you know very visibly you do the wrong thing, but I feel like it's understandable, but it shouldn't be that way, right? Just take it as a lesson and move forward and do right by the community that you're trying to serve. All right, thank y'all so much for listening. Now we're opening up for question and answer. Any questions about what we've discussed, anything that we should discuss further, or anything about Latinx people in opera? We'd love to hear from you. I'm going to stop sharing. Or no, I'm going to leave this up.
And also, I think I see a lot of Latinx folks in the room right now. So if you also want to share your own personal journey or stories, I know that I would love to hear them.
Absolutely. Okay, let me check the chat. I can read the question if you want, Cindy.
Sure.
In terms of YAP programs, what do you think we can do for our part to bring forth more change? Great question.
Mm-hmm. No, go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely start, because it, and you're saying from our part as young artists, I'm assuming, not from the company side. Um, but I think, and at least I'm referencing these application fees that I see all the time, and these outrageous just fees in general, is stop applying for them. Like that's my biggest thing. Like for application fees that are anywhere from 60 to 80 bucks, I mean, you're really just contributing to the problem. They're going to continue doing it if they see that they're getting people into their trap. And on top of that, I think that the biggest thing, especially like if you are not a person of color, is to know how to best support other young artists. And that can go as far as just asking, or promoting their work on social media. That goes a really long way. And that's kind of what we strive to do in Latina Women in Opera, is to promote their work. And you have other organizations such as Colors of Classical Music, such as BIPOC Arts, Black Opera Alliance. I mean, the list goes on and on. So there are ways to get involved. And I know that Black Opera Alliance has a separate forum for non-Black young artists who want to help, who want to contribute, and you stay informed. And it's actually a way to say, here I am, I'm present, I'm ready to show up. What can I do? So those are my thoughts with that.
Yeah, I think those are all great. I think that sometimes it might feel, as young artists, it might feel like, oh, what difference can I make? I'm just like a cog in this system. But um, I think that collectively, our voices are heard. As we've seen this year, and some of the changes that have been made based on some of the things that young artists have collectively done to make changes. Um, it's important that I want to say, especially if you're in a YAP setting, and this is more on an individual level, if you're in a YAP setting, understand your boundaries, understand how you're perceived, and for if you're a Latinx, a non-Black, or a Latinx person with proximity to whiteness, use that to support those people of color that you're around. Use that to support those that are having more difficult time because they're visibly and racialized as, people of color, and maybe there's mistreatment or there's something, there's microaggressions. Be there for them in your own personal lives. Something that tactic that is really helpful is, if, let's say, somebody says a joke that's microaggressive, right? That is talking about, I don't know, like Asian people or Black people, and it's not, ask, like, just ask them, oh, but why is that funny? Oh, bowl. Just keep asking questions until that person realizes that they're being microaggressive, and that's a learning moment right there. So that on a very individual level, while it might not seem like it's making an impact, it does, because it changes the environment. And that person won't make jokes like that again, at least around you, or at least in that space. And that would help other, young artists of color. It's just something simple but very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Zuly. I mean, all of those are on point. And if I may just add, because we were just talking about this as we met yesterday to get ready for this presentation. As I reflect on our conversation yesterday, involving actually very similar to what this question is asking, what can we as young artists do? I think of balance. I don't want people to run into the danger of just going, like, I want to fix this. I want to fix this immediately without understanding and without doing the intentional work that is required, but also not waiting forever to act. Because then there's also the danger of just simply not doing anything and falling into the danger of bystander apathy, which means that you just think that the next person is going to take care of it, and then nothing ever gets done. So finding something to add to that specific question that somebody asks is finding the right balance, and that comes from your own individual internal work.
Absolutely. And that changes as you grow. So there's another question. Do you want me to read it? Okay. If you could choose one thing, what would you like those of non-Latin, Latinx origin to take away from the Latinx community? May I start with this one, Cindy?
Of course.
I think that for me, I would like for non-Latin, non-Latinx origin people to understand that we're not a race. That we're not a race. We're not all the same. We don't have the same experiences. We're a highly complex group of people in the way that we move around the world, in the way that we're racialized, in the experiences that we have, in our cultures. We're very, very complex. And I wish that that nuance was taken into account more.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I feel like that is the most important thing to take away from conversations within the Latinx community and outside the Latinx community. Because Latinx was not a name that we all chose to get put into, but it is. And now where do we go from here, And we do have a lot of similarities, but we have a vast amount of differences. And there's a lot of beauty in the similarities, and there can be a lot of beauty in the differences. It's just really coming together. And again, I'm just going to echo doing the internal work and being able to co-create in diverse spaces like we are in today. It's so very important.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think that if the public, like, I think if like the opera administrators and the opera public would um, have a better understanding that Latinx is not a race and the diversity and the nuance in Latinx, I think that would open up a lot of opportunities for more equitable and diverse casting. And it would also bring more people from our community to the opera because they'll see themselves on stage. So it's a win-win, in my opinion, to go in this direction, to challenge some of these, um, to challenge this category that was created to put all of these people in a group. And then you question, who does that make sense for, right? It's not for us. We didn't choose it. It's not to make sense for us. So yeah, like once we challenge that, I think it'll benefit all parties.
And make Latinx Heritage Month a little less frustrating. So if there are no further questions, oh, here we go. I can read this if we're ready. Have you found that opera companies are staying true to the anti-racist commitment statements that came out after the murder of George Floyd? And does that include BIPOC Latinx folks? Oof, that is a loaded question. It's tough. I think that opera companies are rushing to find something to fix, you know what I mean? And right now, even the rosters, you have that one Black singer, and that's it. And maybe, you know, a couple Asian singers in the roster as well. And it's just, I saw this meme the other day. It's like, this is not what we meant by diversity. And it has a bunch of emojis and that one Black person in the middle. And it's just, there needs, like we mentioned in the PowerPoint, there needs to be this nice balance of quantitative and qualitative data that is being used. And companies need to be very transparent about how they are using it. So as I was talking to Zuly yesterday, as I am applying for young artist programs, lots of applications have this demographic section now. Actually, all of the applications that I turned in have a demographic section now. And it just, you can identify your race / ethnicity. And a lot of them don't even make sense. One option was Latinx, Hispanic, Spanish, all in one option. And you can only choose one. So then that's also another problem. And on the under it, it says like a little disclaimer, this will not be used to make a decision. So as to make sure that nobody gets offended, like, because it's, and how are they using this if they are using it at all, and not just putting it on an application because they're trying to fix situations, you know what I mean? So I think opera companies have a long road ahead. I think that they are making mistakes and hopefully being held accountable. And there are organizations doing that work, a lot of grassroots organizations. And what we can do is to support these organizations so that they can continue that work. And that goes for not only on an opera company level, but even a young artist level, just all around the board. There are ways that you can support these grassroots organizations who are helping to keep these people accountable.
I'm gonna jump in on this question. Well, I think that some companies are doing the necessary work of examining their implicit biases and where they are lacking in, because here's the thing, putting a bunch of people of color in a bunch of different positions in a space that hasn't done the work to make it a safe space for people of color is also a problem, right? You're going to get microaggressions, you're going to further traumatize people, you're going to affect their mental and physical health, as it has been proven time and time again. So it's not just about putting people on the stage of you know, different colors and different abilities and different different LGBTQIA status. Like, it's much more than that. It's all around. And when I'm thinking, oh, are these companies doing this all around? Are they really doing the work of dismantling white supremacy in their institutions? Few and far between, right? In terms of, is specifically when it comes to singers, how we're racialized by the people doing the casting and how we self-identify are two different things, depending on how you present, right? So the questions that Cindy was talking about that were in the forms, that's probably for them to keep records of singers self-reporting where they are in terms of race and ethnicity. A lot of companies are hesitant to do third party reporting or tell you what they think that person's race or ethnicity is, because they know more often than not it's going to be based on implicit bias, stereotypes, and things that they haven't unpacked, and they don't want to go there. But the fact of the matter is that's what really makes a difference on who's getting cast or not, right? Because it's not like it's not like I go into an audition room and I'm like, hi, my name is Zuly and I'm Afro-Latina. I don't. But they see a Black woman, so they usually think, with my proficiency in English, that I'm African American. And then if they want to cast me in something thinking I'm African American, I'm like, culturally, I don't have that background. So what do you want me to do? And it's not like they'll ever cast me as a Latina because I don't look Latina. So that's another huge thing that's going on in this. So yeah, it's complicated. Some are doing the work. It's going to take a lot of time. And taking the time to do it right is really important. And there's going to be a lot of hard conversations that need to be had in order for opera as a whole can move forward. I love this next question. Thank you, Stephen. I'm going to go ahead and read it. What would you like to see from composers and or librettists and other creatives to support Latinx representation in opera? I would like to start with this question because I have my own project, Afro-Latinx Song and Opera Project, where I'm commissioning stuff. And what would I like to see? I would like to see us really delving into who we are and telling our stories, because our stories are important. I would like to see us telling stories of our joy, right? Something that's happening a lot in opera right now is that there are a lot of operas being made about Black trauma, as if Black trauma is the only way to consume Black stories, as if Black people don't have joy in their lives, as if they are not three-dimensional people that exist outside of their trauma. I would like to see stories about, I don't know, me and my friends going to El Colmado and then going to El Salón and getting rolos and then just talking crap. I would love that. That would be a great opera. No, for real though, right? As we could show our culture, we could show how our community. It doesn't have to be trauma. It doesn't have to be stories of. It doesn't always have to be our trauma. I'll leave it at that. So I would love to see us celebrating us in the most full and possible way, all parts of us, and that's what I would love to see from composers and librettists, because there's space for it and we want it and we want to sing it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And at least for, well, I just, something else I would like to see is more compositions in Indigenous languages. There's just simply not enough. And I said indigenous languages, not dialects, because often people call different indigenous languages dialects without giving it the proper respect that it deserves as being a completely separate language. And I would love to see that, because right now, at least, you know, for me, I would love to sing more in Nahuatl, and I've only found one song cycle, not even created by an Indigenous composer, but I would love to see more of that and see even, whether it is their native language or not, just to see more people delve into that experience, not into that experience, but into learning about a different language that, isn't traditional in the operatic repertoire, be it English, Italian, all of that, Spanish. So that's just something that I would love to see. Nat's competitions for composers is still English only. I did not know that.
I didn't know that either, and
Yeah.
they're gonna get an email.
Yeah, I had no idea. Thank you for sharing. So if nobody has any further questions, as we are getting closer to the hour, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up, if that's okay, Julie Mar.
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. So we are just gonna go to the next slide and end with this quote by Mr. Cornel West. Excuse me. Justice is what love looks like in public. Through these movements against oppressive systems, through a reckoning with identity, through these calls to action is the call for love. And without real intentional work, beyond visibility, like Zuly said, beyond performative gestures, but through real intentional work that takes into account both where we want to be and our humanity, can we achieve true justice? So just want to leave everyone with those final thoughts. Thank you, everyone, so much for sharing the space today. Like I said, I know it is a very, very busy time, and we hope everyone has a really special holiday season.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Thank you all so much. I'm gonna drop my email in the chat in case anybody has any like follow-up questions or just
Yeah.
wants to continue the conversation.
Yes, please. I wanted to add to that to thank Zuly and Cynthia so much for doing this. I think this presentation has really been a long time coming, and I think we'll definitely talk about a part 2 and 3 because, like you said, it's a very short time for a lot that has to be done within this community. And I don't want to take up the hour, but a lot of what you guys said, Zuly, a lot of our representation or of Latin representation is like trauma, and that's not all that it's about. And I think the community needs to know we're more than what we are singled out to be.
Yeah, we're more than our pain. We're our joy. We're our history.
Absolutely.
And please check out their Instagrams as well.
Oh, yes. And also, quick plug, Zuly, Afro-Latinx song project, if you want to give like a little introduction to people on how that's going.
Oh
And
yeah, sure. So Afro-Latinx Song and Opera Project recently got a grant. I live in Pittsburgh and I got a grant here for it, advancing Black arts in Pittsburgh, which includes the African diaspora. And so I have now some funding to start some commissions, which will be right now. I am in collaboration with 3 composers, and I'm also in collaboration with an Afro Dominican poet. And things might be coming in the future couple years in New York and Chicago, some debuts in Pittsburgh. So I will just keep everybody posted on the social media web stuff. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy, for making me talk about it.
I don't know if you can put the handle in the chat, but I will also put Latina Woman in Opera in there, and I will also put my own personal one. Yeah. Thank you so much, Julie Maud, for getting this together.
Thank you both so much. And so I think, like you heard at the beginning, it is going to be recorded. So for those of your audience members or just friends who couldn't make it, as soon as this is done, it will download and we're going to put it onto YouTube, and then I will share as quickly as possible.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.